Hello, and welcome once again, my loves, to Strange Playgrounds, and this series taking a look at the CITV series Knightmare from the mid to late 1980s and early 1990s, and one of my favourite shows, not only of childhood, but ever. Easily one of the most influential, one of the most formative pieces of media I've ever experienced. It is, as we discussed in the last video when we looked at Series 1, it is almost like a personal gospel. It's something that's so important to the state of my imagination and my interests and the way narrative works in my mind and the way I apply that in the world. It's very hard to overemphasize. It's a text that's so incredibly powerful for me, and it's very difficult in that regard for me to even pretend any delusion of objectivity regarding it. Nostalgia is very powerful in that regard, very, very powerful. That said, as we discussed in the first video, returning to it with adult eyes, I find it very impressive on a number of levels, especially looking at it contextually. I just don't know how they got away with it. I don't know how they did it. Creator Tim Child always said that the only reason that it was ever made, like the first season was ever made, was because they didn't know what they were doing. The landscape of children's television in the UK was such a different place in the 1980s, the mid-1980s. For one thing, media in general was just different. I mean, there were only 4 channels on television, and the Channel 4 was relatively new at that point, so really, that was all you got. There was no internet, there was no concept of an internet. I mean, even video games, like home video games, were rare and a very, very new thing, as was home media in general. The notion of VHS and videotapes and having media available was phenomenally new. And outlets like, for example, Sky Television, at that point, I'm not even sure Sky Television existed. It was very, very new if it did, and so expensive, only like rich households had it. It was our equivalent of cable back then. It was a very strange place, and of course there were dedicated slots to children's television, which is where Knightmare occurred. Knightmare Series 2 is very interesting. I mean, most fans cite Series 3 as the apex of the early era of Knightmare. That's where it does come together. Series 1 is very much an experiment. They didn't really know what they were doing with it. Everything's a bit looser. It's not quite baked yet, and you can sort of feel that, It's way too hard in Series 1, for one thing. It's way too bloody hard. No winners in Series 1, obviously. A couple of teams got to level 3, which is the last level of the dungeon, but not many made it through. We never really saw much of level 3, which is a real shame. Because level 3 in these early seasons is terrifying. It's so atmospheric. Just being, as Treyguard himself points out, whenever a team gets there, which is rare, by the way, he says every step and every chamber from this point on is a hazard. You will be lucky to survive. Every chamber you pass through, everyone you survive, is going to be an accolade at this point, because everything is terrifying and lethal. And he's absolutely right. Series 2, now they can expand a little bit, and they do. They experiment wildly in this series. In terms of format and structure, it's very much the same as Series 1. A lot of stuff is reused in this series. There's a lot of rooms that are familiar. There's a lot of characters and puzzles and hazards. Merlin is back. Folly is back. The Jester. But there's a lot of new characters too. It introduces characters like Gretel, the maid, who she's very interesting. She's a more positive character in the dungeon, but she can also be sort of like a well-meaning hazard. She can accidentally lead the team off track because she's a little bit flighty. She also becomes, in some of the quests, the object of the quest. She actually becomes the character that they have to free. That's an interesting thing about these early seasons of Knightmare. I'm sure most people who remember Knightmare, they remember that later on the quests were very standard. You had, and we'll talk about it when we get there, but in later series the quests are very standardized. So you have an object to redeem. It's either the Sword of Justice, the Shield of Justice, the Sword of Freedom, the Crown of Truth, I think. Oh no, the Crowning Glory, or the Cup that Heals. You have to recover one of those items, and that's the same for every quest. Early on, like in this series, the quests are various. Like some of them, they have to free Gretel the maid, and that they don't learn that until they're well into the dungeon. Something happens where she falls through a trapdoor, or where she's kidnapped by a character, and that becomes the object of their quest. But they don't go into the dungeon knowing what their quest is. They have to learn it. And some teams, because they don't get all of the clues, they don't answer all of the riddles for the wall monsters, or they get a puzzle wrong. Some teams don't even learn what their quest is, and those teams don't tend to last very long, sadly. But yeah, they're various, and it's really interesting that. I like the variety of the quests in this series, and you can tell that because now the creators, the creative team have got a little bit more of a firm footing. They are inventing wildly. The quests are very different from one another. They're much more expansive as well. There are lots of new rooms and lots of new hazards here. There are new characters. There's Bumptious the Dwarf, who doesn't occur until much later on, generally. And he tends to be... He's one of those characters that... One of the things this series does really well is ambiguous characters. He's friendly enough. He's not hostile or anything like that. But he does prove to be the bane of a couple of quests because they don't answer his riddles correctly, or because they don't satisfy him in some other way. So he doesn't give them a vital spell or clue or password or whatever. And that's really fascinating. Mildred, my personal favourite character, not only of this series, but maybe of the entire... No, my favourite is Hordris, who turns up in the next season. But Mildred is great. Mildred is a witch, and she is, as Treguard describes her, she can both be very useful, but also incredibly dangerous. She's ostensibly a comedy character. She can be very funny at times, but she's also kind of sinister. There is one very notable moment where the team enters a room, and Mildred, she isn't there, but Treguard is sat in a chair near a wellway and saying to them, he's sort of coaxing the Dungeoneer towards the wellway and telling them, oh, come on, you're only wasting life force, get in the wellway. And Treguard, who is with the team in the antechamber, he seems to be sort of frozen. Hugo Mayat is doing this thing where he's sort of like his eyes are wide and he's sort of straining. And it turns out that Mildred has sort of taken his shape and is trying to guide the Dungeoneer into her cauldron. There's stuff like that all the way through where she's hazardous, but if they do please her in some way, she can also be very, very goddamn useful. She can give them spells, she can give them passwords, she can cast spells for them to help them on their way. So yeah, she's an interesting one to deal with. They've usually got to be smart enough not to be taken in by her, and then she will generally reward them for that. But even so, she's still a hazard. There's a very funny sequence actually in this series which always kills me, where they're out. This is another thing that happens actually. They're outside the dungeon. They've emerged into, it's like a rocky ledge which is outside, and you can see sky and stars and whatnot. And Mildred is wheeling around on her broomstick, but she can't control it. So they've got it. She's even got, I mean, this is really dumb, but really, really funny. She's got a little letter L around her neck, which if you're from the UK, when you're learning to drive, you have to put on your car this big red L, and that's what she's got around her neck. It's very funny, very silly, and the whole thing is they've got to guide her down. They've got to help her and get a reward for helping her. That's really cool. Mildred is one of my favorite characters and really well performed. One of the weirder new rooms in Series 2, the Oracle of Confusion. It's really weird. It always occurs on level 2, and it's this very sinister room. It's the level 2 clue room from Series 1, but it's got a new filter over it, where it looks weird and spectral. And there's a vast ghostly face in the wall in the background, and it's talking. And in order to, Traegard tells them what they have to do. In order to hear it, what they've got to do, the Dungeoneer has to close their eyes very tight and just lift the helmet of justice slightly above their head. And then they and the team can hear what the Oracle is saying. But as Traegard advises them, they see much, but their wisdom and their knowledge is unfiltered. It's got no context. So they say all sorts of weird stuff. And what the puzzle in the Oracle Chamber is, the team have to filter out the useful information from the non-useful stuff, which is actually kind of tricky at times because everything they say is really cryptic. It's a very good chamber, and I remember that chamber from when I was a kid, and it always freaking me out. It's a really odd, disturbing room, that one. There's a couple of other characters. There's Olaf the Viking, who, oh, by the way, Olaf is one of the first characters you might notice where you might end up like gnawing your knuckles when he turns up, because children's television in the UK in the 1980s was one of the last bastions of sort of what you might call soft racism in media. A lot of it had gone away at that point. A lot of it had been deemed like not appropriate. Olaf is kind of like a racial stereotype of a Nordic, of a Viking, of a Nordic person. Obviously not played by someone from Norway or from any of the Scandinavian countries. And so it's kind of like, oh God, really? He's basically a hazard. They have to give him something or convince him that they have something of worth so that he lets them pass or gives them a password or whatever, which is kind of interesting. You also have, one of the more brilliant, not a character, but one of the creatures that turns up to make them hurry up, basically. If they linger too long in a room, then various monsters can turn up. And one of the new ones from this series, which is actually one of the scarier ones in the entire run, is a thing called the Automatum, the Mechanical Warrior. And the Automatum, what will happen is they'll be in a room and they'll be lingering too long. And Traegard will say, you're lingering too long in this chamber, team. And then you'll hear this clanking and clockwork, and this warrior turns up who is moving in this very awkward mechanical way. And he will chase them or he will try to harm them, and it's actually really scary. It's just a guy, it's just an actor in like a costume, but because of the clockwork sound and the way Traegard frames it, it's really goddamn scary. Really scary. There is a quest I remember where the Automatum chases the team, the Dungeoneer, almost through the entirety of level 2, and it's really cool. I think they've got to cast a rust spell on it at one point to make it stop, to freeze it in place, which is really cool, right? one of the biggest new characters, and he's not really a new character. He is referenced in Series 1, is Mogdred. Mogdred is the antagonist character. He's described as Merlin's alter ego. Merlin is back. Merlin is the same as ever. He meets the team towards the end of level 2, if they make it to his chamber, and they have to answer questions and gain magic from him to progress. And he's kind of, he's played by John Woodnutt, and he's really fun. Merlin is really funny. He's kind of like a doofy, absent-minded, but very incredibly wise and powerful wizard. Mogdred, also played by John Woodnutt, is the complete opposite. He is terrifying when he turns up. Very often you only hear his voice, you hear him laugh, or you hear him say something. He's incredibly scary. He also, bizarrely, has the power to freeze Treguard when he turns up at times. There is a very infamous sequence where the Dungeoneer has to make it across this veil where there's like a bridge, but it's broken. And to make the team trip up, Mogdred appears, and he casts a shroud spell, which makes the Dungeoneer invisible, so they can't direct him. And Treguard is sort of frozen in place. It's really cool. They've got to dispel the shroud spell to progress without Treguard's advice. He's one of the very few characters who can actually do that. Interestingly, Mogdred is used not only as an antagonist character, but also as a vehicle for enhancing and expanding the mythology of the dungeon itself. So very often when he turns up, he tells them to take off the helmet. And Treguard is aghast at that. He really very firmly tells them, do not do that. And it's as though if they did take off the helmet, then Mogdred would have power over them, and that would be the end. That would be it. Also, Mogdred is one of the few characters who can hear Treguard in the dungeon and can interact with him, which is interesting. There's loads of new monsters. There is one monster, actually, which is by a classic of Knightmare. Most people who remember Knightmare remember Ariadne, the Queen of Spiders, and this is the first series where she makes an appearance. Ariadne's room is this massive chamber, mostly open, where there's no ceiling, and there are 3 doors, one right ahead and one to either side. And if the Dungeoneer doesn't hurry up, Ariadne, this gigantic spider, which is a real spider, they've just sort of filmed a real spider and superimposed the footage over the painted room. He crawls from right to left across the ceiling, and if they're not quick enough, she seals up the exits with web, and they can't get away, and she kills them. Ariadne will turn up in every season of Knightmare from now up until Series 7, I think. She may even be in Series 7, but she's in most series as a hazard. When we get to it, we'll get to it. But in Series 4, she's almost like an end-of-level boss for Level 2, which is really cool. There's also in Level 3 has this massive expansion in this series, because of course in Series 1 they just didn't see much of it because most people died. Most people didn't make it, they died. There is the dragon. The dragon room is really cool. I don't know if anyone got to the dragon room in Series 1. I think a couple of people did, but it's here too, where the Dungeoneer emerges onto the dragon's nose, and they either have to send it to sleep with a spell, or they just have to hurry up and get out of the bloody room, or it will destroy them. There's a really weird room, actually. A lot of rooms are sort of repurposed. So there's a room where it's the old room that used to have the snake in it, with the 2 arches, and one of the arches is tumbled down, but now there's like a frog creature in it. It's really strange. It doesn't really do anything. It's there to sort of confuse the team and to make them scared, which is kind of cool. All they have to do is sort of hurry up and get out, or I imagine they would start losing life force or something like that. The old scorpion room is back. In Series 1 there was this room, and it's the same room as the snake room with the tumbled down arches, but there's now a spectral scorpion in it. And what they have to do is time the Dungeoneer's movements, because the Scorpion is periodically stinging the air. And if they don't time their passage quickly enough, then of course it will catch them and it will damage their life force. There's a really interesting new room in level 1, which is the combat chess room. They emerge into a chamber where there is a chessboard on the floor, and there is a black bishop piece on the opposite wall, and they actually have to play chess. Their move, obviously, is the knight's move. So if the kids don't know what that is, then they're in trouble. And and the bishop's move is the bishop's move, and they have to guide the Dungeoneer towards the exit whilst avoiding the bishop. So they've got to preempt the bishop's movements. It's actually really complex, that one. And you can hear, it's one of the many, many rooms in Knightmare where when the first team do it, when they win, you can hear the production team clapping them just off screen, which is really, really cool. We also see, we see a lot of familiar rooms come back. There's the Chambers of the Catacombs are here, although there's a lot of new stuff here too. The Chamber of the Catacombs does new things. So you don't just hear like the undead army marching around like you did in Series 1. Sometimes the floor starts to disappear and there are all these skulls, like spectral skulls under it, and the team have to guide the Dungeoneer to the correct exit really quickly or fail massively. There's the Mills of Doom, which I believe they often feature in level 2, which are these gigantic cogs the Dungeoneer will emerge on, and the team have to guide the Dungeoneer between them without them falling off. In level 3, there's the Medusa. The Medusa is fantastic. The way they implement it in this series is very clever, actually. It's this gigantic animated Medusa's face in the far wall, and Treguard says that they can't look at it too long without being turned to stone. So the first advisor has to start giving directions, then on Treguard's signal they have to look away, and the next advisor has to start giving directions, and then on Treguard's signal they have to look away, and so on until they get to the exit. It's a really clever interactive room. We also for the first time get to see the end of the dungeon in this series. It's different in every series, but we actually get to see the end of the dungeon and what it looks like. There's like usually after not defeating so much as surviving Mogdred, they emerge into a chamber where the end of the room is broken down, and there's like this expanse, like a firmament of planets and stars, and they have to leap through this gateway, which is like it's like Mogdred's face, and there's a guillotine coming up and down. And when they emerge on the other side, then they're in this expanse, and if they've got all of the pieces of their quest, which is usually a spell or something like that, they can cast it and win, which is really, really cool. There's also, the opening of the dungeon is interesting in this series as well. When they emerge into the dungeon, they're in that chamber. They're actually in the chamber with the stars and the firmament ahead of them, but this like bolt of magic comes out of the firmament and starts to swirl around, and it coalesces and forms into like a Wheel of Fortune thing where you can see the rooms of the dungeon spinning around, and there's a lever, and they have to pull the lever to stop it on a particular room, and that determines where their quest starts. So it's kind of randomized, which is really cool. I really love that. It's a brilliant way of getting them into the dungeon and of giving them a choice early on, which determines where their quest goes. It also kind of enhances the metaphysics of the dungeon a little, because they're actually passing through a very small space, but the dungeon seems massively expansive. As Treguard has said before, it's not real. It's a magical, illusory space, which is really, really fun, isn't it? I love that so much, because they're really just passing through the illusion. It's great. And again, this is one of the things that will escalate and escalate as Knightmare goes on. The mythology of the dungeon. You'll see more of that when we get to Series 3.
The dungeon is over. The very magic that sustains it is fading. Watchers, you too must wait now until the dungeon reforms itself and prepares for the next age of adventure. Just remember, when Fortune's wheel spins, the Knightmare returns.